The first time someone called me little sister, I laughed. I was 33 years old, standing in the produce aisle of a grocery store on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. My cart held milk, bread, apples, and coffee, nothing unusual. My biggest concern was getting home before the frozen food melted. Then I heard a shaky voice behind me. "Emily?" I turned, expecting to see someone from work. Instead, an elderly man in his late 70s stared at me with watery eyes. His hands trembled as he gripped his shopping basket. He smiled. "I knew it was you." I smiled politely. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" He looked confused. "You don't remember me?" I shook my head. "I'm afraid not." His smile faded, replaced by disbelief. "I used to visit your parents every Sunday." Still nothing. Then he said something that stopped my heart. "I haven't seen your brother since he was a teenager." I blinked. "My brother?" He frowned. "David." The name meant nothing to me. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The man looked genuinely shocked. "No." He studied my face carefully. "Those eyes. Your father's eyes. I'd recognize them anywhere." My stomach tightened. "I'm an only child." His expression changed instantly. He stared at me as though I'd just told him the sky was green. "No, Emily." He whispered the words almost to himself. "You were never an only child." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The grocery store carried on around us. Children laughed near the bakery. Shopping carts rolled past. A cashier called for a price check. Everything felt strangely distant. "I think you're mistaken," I said again, forcing a nervous laugh. "My mother told me I never had any brothers or sisters." The old man slowly shook his head. "I was there when your brother was born." Every word hit harder than the last. I held him. I felt my chest tighten. "My mother told me I had a brother who died a few days after he was born." The old man's face turned pale. "Died?" He looked genuinely horrified. "Emily." His voice cracked. "David didn't die." I couldn't breathe. "What?" "He was 16 the last time I saw him." 16. Not 16 days. 16 years old. I stared at him, unable to speak. He reached into his wallet with trembling fingers and pulled out an old photograph. The edges were faded. The colors had almost disappeared. He handed it to me. In the picture stood my parents. They looked almost 20 years younger. My father had his arm around a teenage boy with dark hair. Standing beside them was a little girl. Me. I recognized the yellow dress immediately. There was only one photograph of me wearing it. It sat framed on my mother's fireplace. Except, in the version hanging in her house, the boy wasn't there. I had always assumed the empty space beside my father was because someone had cropped the picture. Now I realize someone hadn't cropped a background. They had erased a person. My hands began shaking. "Where did you get this?" The old man looked at me sadly. "Your father gave it to me years ago." I couldn't stop staring. The smiling boy had one arm around my shoulders. We looked happy, comfortable, like we'd grown up together. But I had absolutely no memory of him. None. I looked back at the old man. "If you're telling me the truth," my voice barely came out, "then why would my parents lie?" He hesitated, his eyes filled with regret. Finally, he whispered 5 words that changed everything. "Because David wasn't supposed to disappear." That night, I drove straight to my parents' house with a photograph in my hand. But before I could ask a single question, I noticed my mother standing at the living room window. The moment she saw the photo, the color drained from her face. I didn't call before driving to my parents' house. For 33 years, they had never given me a reason to doubt them. They had always been loving, supportive, and protective. But now, every memory suddenly felt incomplete. The old photograph rested on the passenger seat beside me. Every few minutes, I glanced at it. The teenage boy looked so familiar. His smile, his eyes, the way his arm rested naturally around my shoulders. There was no awkwardness between us. This wasn't a cousin I met once. This looked like someone who had been part of my everyday life. Someone I should have remembered. As I turned onto my parents' street, I noticed the living room lights were already on. My mother was standing by the front window. The second her eyes landed on the photograph in my hand, she froze. Even from outside, I watched the color disappear from her face. Then something happened that frightened me more than anything. She rushed away from the window. Not toward the front door, toward the back of the house. I hurried out of my car and rang the bell. No answer. I rang again. Nothing. Finally, my father opened the door. His smile appeared automatically. "Emily, you should have called." Then he noticed the picture. His smile vanished. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. He simply stared. His hand slowly tightened around the doorknob. "Where did you get that?" His voice was almost a whisper. "I met someone today." I held the picture higher. "He said I have a brother." My father's face became completely expressionless. "You don't." "He said his name is David." Silence. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. I looked past him. "Where's Mom?" "She's resting." "No." I stepped inside. I saw her run. My father closed the door behind me. "Emily." His voice sounded tired. "There are things you don't understand." "Then help me understand." I placed the photograph on the dining table. "I've seen this picture before." He looked down. "It used to be on the fireplace." I pointed toward the living room. "The version hanging there doesn't have him." He slowly lowered his head. My heart sank. "You edited him out." He didn't deny it. Instead, he whispered something that made my stomach twist. "I wish we'd destroy every copy." I felt tears forming. So he was real. Still no answer. Was David my brother? My father rubbed his forehead. "Yes." One word. Just one. Yet it shattered 33 years of certainty. "You told me he died." He nodded without looking at me. "I know." "He didn't?" Another pause. "No." I could barely stay standing. "So where is he?" My father looked toward the hallway, almost as if he hoped my mother would rescue him from answering. Instead, she slowly walked into the room. Her eyes were red from crying. The moment she saw the photograph, she covered her mouth. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I had never heard my mother sound so broken. "For what?" She looked at me with tears running down her cheeks. "For every birthday." My heart pounded. "For every Christmas." Another tear rolled down her face. "For every lie." I stared at her. "Tell me where David is." She closed her eyes. "We don't know." I frowned. "What do you mean you don't know?" My father finally spoke. "We've been looking for him." He swallowed hard. "For 17 years. The room seemed to spin. "You lost your own son?" "No." My mother shook her head violently. "He left." "Why?" Neither of them answered. I raised my voice for the first time in my life. "WHY?" My father slowly reached into a drawer beside the dining table. From inside, he removed a small wooden box. It looked old, untouched, covered in dust. He placed it in front of me. "I prayed you'd never find out." My hands trembled as I opened the lid. Inside was a stack of letters. Every envelope had the same handwriting. Every one was addressed to my father. The newest letter was unopened. The oldest was dated 17 years ago. I picked up the first envelope. In the corner, instead of a return address, there were only 2 handwritten words. From David. With shaking hands, I opened the oldest letter. The very first sentence made my blood run cold. "If Emily ever learns the truth, tell her I didn't abandon her." I was forced to leave. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The oldest letter trembled in my hands. Neither of my parents tried to stop me from opening it. My father stared at the floor. My mother quietly wiped tears from her cheeks. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the old clock hanging above the fireplace. I unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was neat and steady. At the top, it simply read, "Dad." I swallowed hard and continued reading. "If Emily ever learns the truth, please tell her I didn't abandon her." I was forced to leave. She deserves to know that I loved her every single day, even after I was gone. My vision blurred. I looked at my parents. What does he mean? Forced to leave? My father finally spoke. When David was 16, he started making terrible decisions. He skipped school, got into fights, and spent time with people who only pulled him deeper into trouble. My mother nodded. "We tried everything." counseling, changing schools, even moving. For a while, we thought we had him back. She paused, fighting back tears. Then, one night, he was arrested with two older boys after they broke into an abandoned warehouse. I frowned. The old man told me David wasn't a bad person. He wasn't, my father replied immediately. When the security guard inside collapsed during the panic, the other boys ran. David stayed. He called an ambulance. He saved the man's life. I stared at him. Then why did he leave? My father sighed. Our town didn't care about the full story. People only remembered the arrest. Every interview, every job application, every chance he got. Someone recognized his name. My mother quietly added, he started believing everyone would always see him as a criminal. I looked back at a letter. I know you think leaving is the only way I'll ever have a future. My heart pounded. I slowly looked at my father. You told him to leave. He closed his eyes. No. I begged him to stay. He packed his own bag. He said he didn't want his mistakes following you through school. I couldn't believe it. So, you told me he died? My mother's voice cracked. We were terrified. Terrified that one day you'd ask where he was. Terrified you'd go looking for him. We convinced ourselves we were protecting you. I looked around the living room. Every family photo, every holiday memory, every birthday. There wasn't a single picture of David anywhere. It was as if someone had erased 17 years of my family's history. Then I noticed something inside the wooden box. Beneath the letters lay a small envelope sealed with clear tape. Across the front, in David's handwriting, were 4 words. Give this to Emily. My hands trembled. I looked at the date. It wasn't 17 years old. It had been written just 3 months ago. I slowly raised my eyes. You told me you hadn't heard from him in years. Neither of my parents answered. My father simply whispered, I was hoping you'd never see that letter. With shaking hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the single page inside. The first sentence made my heart stop. Emily, if you're reading this, I finally found the courage to come home. My fingers tightened around David's letter. I took a deep breath before reading the first line again. Emily, if you're reading this, I finally found the courage to come home. My heart pounded. The letter wasn't old. It had been written only 3 months earlier. I looked at my parents. You knew he wanted to come home. My father slowly nodded. He called me. My chest tightened. You talked to him? For the first time in almost 17 years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He found my phone number through an old family friend. My father looked exhausted. He said he had built a quiet life in another state. He was married. He owned a small construction company. He wasn't the scared 16-year-old who walked away anymore. Tears filled my mother's eyes. He wanted to meet you. I stared at her. So, why didn't he? She buried her face in her hands. Because I asked him not to. The room went completely silent. What? I told him, she whispered, that your life was peaceful now. I told him reopening old wounds would only hurt everyone. I stepped backward. You told my own brother to stay away from me. She nodded through tears. I thought I was protecting you. No. My voice cracked. You were protecting yourself. She didn't argue, because she knew I was right. I looked back at the letter. Further down the page, David had written, Dad said Mom still blames herself for everything. Please don't hate her. She only ever wanted both of us to have a better life. I closed my eyes. Even after everything, he was still trying to protect our family. Then I noticed something folded inside the envelope. A recent photograph. David stood outside a small blue house. His hair was shorter now. There were a few gray strands near his temples. Standing beside him was a smiling woman. Between them stood a little girl who looked about 8 years old. She had my father's eyes. On the back of the picture, David had written, Emily, I'd love for you to meet your niece someday. A tear rolled down my cheek. For 33 years, I believed I was an only child. Now I was discovering I wasn't only a sister, I was an aunt. Just then, my father's phone rang. He looked at the screen. His hands began shaking. I glanced at the caller ID. There was only one name, David. No one in the room moved. My father looked at me with tears in his eyes. Then, without saying a word, he placed the phone in my hand. My thumb hovered over the green answer button. Then I heard a familiar voice through the speaker. "Emily, if that's really you, I've been waiting 17 years to hear your voice." My hand trembled as I answered the phone. "Hello?" For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I heard a man quietly exhale. "Emily?" His voice was calm, gentle, almost afraid. Tears immediately filled my eyes. I don't know what to call you." A soft laugh came through the speaker. "You can call me David." Hearing his name spoken by its owner made everything feel real. "I've been looking at your picture for the last hour," I whispered. "So have I." "What?" "I still have the last family photo we ever took together." I looked down at the photograph lying on the table. "The one with the yellow dress?" He laughed again. "You still remember the dress?" I shook my head. "No, I only remember the picture." There was another long silence. Finally he said, "I never blamed you." The words broke something inside me. "I don't remember you." "I know. You were only 4. I used to carry you on my shoulders every Saturday morning." My throat tightened. "You loved strawberry ice cream. You cried whenever Dad left for work. And every night, you refused to sleep unless I read you the same story." I closed my eyes. Nothing, not a single memory came back. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for." His voice remained steady. "The adults made their choices. You were just a little girl." I looked across the room. Both of my parents were crying silently. For the first time, I realized they had spent 17 years carrying the weight of one terrible decision. "David," I asked quietly, "why didn't you come back sooner?" He took a long breath. "I tried. I wrote letters. I called. I even drove past the house twice." "What stopped you?" "I believed Mom." The words hit like a punch. "She told me you'd grown up believing I was dead. She said showing up would destroy your life." I looked at my mother. She couldn't meet my eyes. "I believed staying away was the last good thing I could do for you." I wiped my tears. "You should have let me decide." "I know." His voice cracked for the first time. "And I'm sorry." Before either of us could say another word, a little girl's voice echoed through the phone. "Daddy?" He laughed softly. "I have to go." My heart sank. "Will I ever meet you?" There was no hesitation. "I'm already driving." I looked at the clock. "But you live in another state." "I do. And I'll be there in about 3 hours." My father suddenly stood up so quickly that his chair scraped across the floor. He looked out the front window. Then he whispered, "Oh my God." I hurried beside him. A pickup truck had just pulled into the driveway. I looked back at my phone. The call was still connected. David chuckled. "I guess I made better time than I expected." My heart was pounding as I reached for the front door. 17 years after saying goodbye, my brother was standing on the other side. For a few seconds, no one moved. I stood with my hand resting on the doorknob, trying to steady my breathing. On the other side of the door was someone I had spent 33 years believing had died as a baby. Except he hadn't. He had laughed. He had cried. He had grown up. And somehow, life had kept us apart. I slowly opened the front door. A man stood on the porch. His dark hair had begun to gray around the temples, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of years I had never shared with him. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then he smiled, the same smile from the old photograph. "Hi, Emmy." My heart stopped. No one has called me that since I was little. He laughed softly. "I know. You used to get angry whenever anyone else tried." Tears blurred my vision. Without thinking, I stepped forward. He wrapped his arms around me. It didn't feel like hugging a stranger. It felt like finding a missing piece of my life. Behind him stood the woman from the photograph and a little girl. The little girl peeked around his leg with a shy smile. "Daddy, is this Aunt Emily?" David smiled. "It is." The little girl walked over and hugged me without hesitation. "I've wanted to meet you forever." I laughed through my tears. "So have I." When we walked inside, the room fell silent. My parents stood frozen. David looked at our mother first. Neither of them spoke for several long seconds. Finally, she walked toward him. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words carried 17 years of guilt. "I thought I was protecting this family." David gently shook his head. "We all thought we were protecting someone." He hugged her. Then he hugged our father. No shouting. No blame. Just a family finally admitting that love without honesty can still break people apart. Later that evening, we sat around the same dining table where I had learned the truth only days earlier. David told us about his life, how he worked his way through trade school, how he started a small construction company, how he met his wife, how he never stopped wondering what kind of woman his little sister had become. Before leaving, he reached into his truck and brought back a worn cardboard box. "I've carried this with me for 17 years. Inside were photo albums, birthday cards, school drawings, every newspaper clipping that mentioned my graduation, my first promotion, even the marathon I had run at 20-8. I looked at him in disbelief. "You kept all of this?" He smiled. "I missed being your brother, but I never stopped loving my sister." I couldn't hold back my tears. For years, I believed my family had buried a tragedy. The truth was far more complicated. They had buried their pain instead, and in doing so, they nearly buried each other. Today, our family still isn't perfect. We can't get back the birthdays we missed, the holidays we never shared, or the 17 years we lost. But every Sunday, we gather around the same dining table. My niece runs through the house laughing. My parents smile more than they cry. And every time David calls me Emmy, I am reminded that some families don't heal because time passes. They heal because someone finally chooses to tell the truth. Sometimes, the greatest reunion isn't finding the person you lost. It's finding the courage to become a family again.